As anniversaries go, this may be one both sides would rather forget. The physical distance between China and the EU may feel even longer this week as leaders gather in Beijing. The 25th EU-China summit in the Chinese capital is supposed to commemorate half a century of bilateral relations, but it comes at a time when the two sides disagree on a raft of policy issues. Brussels has said the focus of the summit will include global geopolitical challenges, namely Russia's in Ukraine. Xi Jinping is seen as a key ally of Vladimir Putin and has repeatedly defended Moscow's actions, infuriating Ukraine's Western backers.
When we stand up for Ukraine's future, Europe must show strength. Or when we go to China to defend our interests, Europe must show strength. And this strength only comes through our unity.
Tariffs introduced by the United States in April have sent both Beijing and Brussels scrambling to make deals with Washington, yet both may see opportunity in closer economic alignment with each other, despite previous disputes. The EU runs a significant trade deficit with China, worth about $367 billion last year. That's driven by high imports of machinery, vehicles and electronics. Brussels wants a more balanced economic relationship. It also has repeatedly criticised China's forced technology transfers, its trade barriers and its state-led economy, claiming it creates unfair competition in key industries, especially steel, electric vehicles and green technology. The EU is also pushing for fairer access to rare earths and magnets, where China currently dominates the supply chain. Yet there has been something of a rapprochement, with both sides last week lifting all restrictions on mutual exchange.
Over the past few years, there have been some setbacks in the legislative exchanges between China and Europe due to well-known reasons. And under the current circumstances, both sides believe that it's of great importance for China and Europe to strengthen their cooperation with each other.
Trade chiefs have already held what Beijing called candid and in-depth discussions ahead of the summit. Finding common ground may seem like a 1,000-mile journey. This week could be a step forward. Joel Flynn, TRT World.
For more, we're joined by Jacob Mardell in Berlin. He's a senior fellow at Signification. Welcome to the programme, Jacob. Now, the EU runs a $360 billion trade deficit with China. Is rebalancing that realistic anytime soon?
Short answer, no, not meaningfully. So the goods deficit with China has fallen from its peak in 2022, but it's still large. Von der Leyen's gone to Beijing explicitly talking about rebalancing the trade relationship, but I don't think anyone in Brussels is actually holding their breath for a quick fix. The gap is structural. China's not shifting to a consumption-led model. It's doubling down on manufacturing, and meanwhile, the EU defensive toolbox is quite narrowly targeted. So it's sectors that matter to Europe, but nothing that will massively shift those headline numbers. So more realistically, I think we see a continued narrowing, low double digits over a couple of years, because primarily Beijing isn't offering those structural changes, subsidies, market access that would deliver substantive change.
And with the ongoing political tension, can the two still find real common ground on trade, particularly given the current tariff environment that both are facing?
On trade, I'm not sure. To some extent, there are islands of cooperation on climate, although even a joint statement on climate is in question. Maybe limited facilitation for specific EU firms in China. Beyond trade, anecdotally, there's been more interest than usual from Chinese counterparts in dialogue and cooperation. I think most notably the director of the German think tank, the MacArthur Institute for China Studies here in Berlin. He's going to China. They were sanctioned in 2021 by China, and technically they haven't been allowed in the country. So that's quite an important symbolic move. So there's a bit more openness for dialogue behind the scenes, at least.
Right, and could Trump's tariffs push China and the EU closer together economically?
So on the EU side, post-Trump, there have been voices across Europe that have been pushing for closer cooperation with China as an antidote to trade frictions. Von der Leyen even has softened her tone on China, but the de-risking measures continue to continue. I think she still wants to sort of show a strong face to China, and Brussels is broadly resisting the urge to jump into bed with China as a response to transatlantic tensions. On the Chinese side, there has been greater appetite for cooperation with Europe, but as ever when Beijing seeks to woo Europe, it's mostly rhetorical, more diplomatic charm. And also I think Beijing feels like it's in a really good place right now. It doesn't feel vulnerable, so there's not much of that sort of need to make real concessions. There's also a real danger that with Trump potentially now pursuing a more transactional approach to China, pushing for a meeting with Xi Jinping, that this reduces Europe's leverage further and sort of risks leaving Brussels out in the cold a bit.
Jacob Mardell, Senior Fellow at Signification, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.